Hey, Ari. Thank you, everybody. I'm happy to be with you all again. Those of you I'm meeting for the first time, hello. By the way, Ari, it is 10:34 in Greece right now, so it's 1 hour later than Hamburg. Um, so I just I think that starting with Greece for Jewish people is probably in many ways the right thing to do. I find when whenever I bring groups to Morocco or to Jews with an Islamic influence, but especially Morocco, I always say that you need to understand Islam to understand who we are as Jews. I think that is doubly the case in when it comes to understanding Greece and our relationship with Greece. So Jewish people, of course, we've been um, influenced by the Greeks, philosophy, um, governance, theater, almost every single aspect from the time of Alexander the Great, which in which we first received Hellenism by and of course rejected it in the story of Hanukkah, the Maccabees, and eventually got reintroduced to it via Maimonides, Rambam, who filtered it to the Jews via Islam, which prized Greek learning. So in many ways, we are the recipients of Greek thinking in three different ways. First of all, as I told you, the first two ways I mentioned, and the third way, of course, is that we're brought up in Western culture. So we're educated without even realizing it in that way of thinking. At the same time, we without our basic educational system has this incredible onslaught of our senses through these different ways, and I think that by pursuing this method, I guess step by step, methodologically, I guess I would say, we'll understand more about ourselves. So today I called it session one, from the agora to the assembly, the Greek invention of democracy. And in today's times, it's not fashionable to give all the credit to the Greeks, but I think we have to actually rethink that and actually give credit where credit is due. I use the word invention when it comes to the Greeks for almost everything. I believe the Greeks invented democracy. I believe the Greeks invented history with Herodotus versus just keeping records. I believe the Greeks invented theater, although there are Asian cultures that can arguably say have found it at the same time. The Greeks, of course, invented the alphabet as we know it, and so on and so on. And one of the questions that we we come to frequently is why the Greeks? What happened there that what was the unrest? What was the disquiet that made them question who they were, who the gods were? Why the very idea of their senses? Like, why are we actually touching a table, or is it something else? What led the Greeks to question everything and wonder about everything? And it really is a mystery. And hopefully, as I said, by these different four different lectures, we'll start being able to actually at least discuss it, if not answer it better. So the very first picture that I showed you on my slideshow is actually a these are pottery shards from about 400 before Common Era, BCE. And what we see, these are actual votes with people's names on it from the Pnyx, from ancient Athens, where citizens got together and made decisions about things and wrote the names of people to and had them counted in what is arguably not arguably what is the very first democratic process that we know of anywhere in the world. In other words, by democratic, I mean every citizen, every person who was counted a citizen had a vote and had the same equivalent vote if you were a Greek citizen. So these I'll come to this more later. And let's see if I can move start my slideshow. And I wanted to start this by discussing mythology and history and this interesting interplay that we have. So we have I've shown you this fellow. His name is Cecrops, the first king of Athens, and you see he's shown with a snake's body. Yet the ancient Greeks believed he was their first mortal human king. So he's represented in ancient Greek legends as being the writer of the first elements of what comprises civilized life, like marriage, the very first king to divide ancient Attica into 12 different communities, and also is the first person who worshipped Zeus as the principal god, as the main god of the pantheon. So so he's but yet so he's acknowledged as the first king, and yet he's shown with this body of a snake. And so we have the same idea of mythology and history, kind of this cloudy beginning, and we have this in many cultures, including if you look at our very own Torah. We look at Genesis, we look at the stories of Adam and Eve, or the create, and then you get the stories of Noah and the flood, and suddenly you get these detailed stories of lineages of person after person, and we're meant to believe these people are mortal, just like us, yet they can live for 1,000 years, or like Noah's grandfather, or they can live. They all live hundreds of years. Um, they have superhuman abilities, and yet they're considered to be mortals. So I just thought the Greeks also had this. And so you see this snake body, by the way. The word for this in ancient Greek is chthonic, chthonic, meaning coming from the earth. So snakes are seen as coming from the earth, and that means that they have a relationship between the underworld, the world of the supernatural and of the dead, and that of the living. And when we go to Greece, we're going to see elements of this. Here you have an early Greek pediment with again the snake body coming from the earth, and at the very top you have three different bodies representing the concepts of earth, wind, and fire. We'll see this together at the Acropolis Museum. So again, this element again of science, breaking down the supernatural into something that's understandable, into the natural, and yet still combining that with something that is somehow otherworldly. And the Greeks do this very often. They compartmentalize. They say there's a place for madness, for passion, and that's the god Dionysus. That's drinking, partying, passionate happiness, passionate sadness, and also for the intellect via Apollo, cool thinking, and both were equally acknowledged and equally worshipped. So just keep in mind the Greeks had a place for everything, and they acknowledged that place and gave it its due credit. Perhaps that's one of the clues we need to solve as to why the Greeks. So I was going to say, if how do we differentiate between myth and history? To understand Greece, and when we go there together, we're going to have to understand how the Greeks saw themselves. I use this image as an example from one of the earliest images of the Star of David. It's from the Leningrad Codex from about 1,000 Common Era, and when we see a Star of David, perhaps without realizing it, we're calling it Magen David. We're acknowledging David as somehow as one of the most important kings of Israel. We're acknowledging our own lineage, and we do this without realizing what we're actually claiming whenever we draw it. Whenever we have this any kind of image, a menorah, a lulav, an etrog, we're acknowledging something that's mythological and yet very much rooted in our identity without realizing it. And we have to understand where the Greeks were coming from in that context as well. So when today's lecture topic is actually about the invention of democracy. How did the Greeks reach this idea of democracy? All other cultures, in Mesopotamia, you had kings. In Egypt, you had pharaohs, and they were always semi-divine, if not divine, but always semi-divine. What happened to the Greeks that actually said, we're not interested in monarchs and kings with all of their powers and grandeurs. We actually want to celebrate the common person. And suddenly in art, you get celebration of the common people. On Greek vases, you get photos of what regular everyday people are doing, and not photos, drawings. And you see this represented everywhere. And I wondered how I could maybe discuss with you, or have us start thinking about what is democracy? How do we start sharing power among people versus one overall leader? And I was wondering, this very early story that we have of in the story of Moses' father-in-law Jethro, when Moses first starts to lead his people, Jethro looks at this kind of chaotic, um, basically chaotic type of leadership in which it's just Moses at the very top with Aaron, and there's a lot of dissatisfaction, a lot of problems, and he actually sits down and spells out to Moses very carefully how to delegate authority, how to have various levels of judges, how to create different elders with different powers, and how each people will be representative over a certain number of people. And for many, this division of powers is kind of they say this might be an early description of a democracy, of a prototype of a democracy. But of course, it doesn't equate to a full democratic system. But there is a distribution of power. So Jethro's system kind of focuses on on an efficient administration under a divinely appointed leader, Moses. So I thought that this was this hierarchy, and it's also hierarchical in nature. So with Moses at the top with this chain of judges, and of course it's meant to focus on efficiency. And so the mandate ends up being divine. But I thought this was an interesting place to begin. And let's now look at Greece itself. We're going to be in Athens, and we're going to see at the very top there's a hill. At the very top of the hill is the Parthenon, this beautiful temple. You can see it over here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. And the Acropolis, acro means the height, polis of the city. So on the top of the city, you often had this concept of this is where the gods reside. The gods live in Olympus. The gods live in the mountains. So you go whenever you want to worship the divine, you look upwards. You go upwards. And so the sacrifices happened here on the Acropolis. The temples to the gods were here on the Acropolis, because the goddess Athena was the goddess of Athens itself. We'll get into that mythology on another lecture. This temple was dedicated to her. So that was for on high. In lower on, can you see in the bottom? This here we have the agora, the place where regular things happen. What does regular things happen? Philosophers taught. What did philosophy mean? Philosophy, mathematics, science. It meant philosophy as we know of it, discussing matters. It meant discussing politics. It meant discussing the latest play that one might have seen in the theater. The affairs of the city were incredibly important. By the way, this painting is, in case you're interested, I didn't give the credit here. It's by Leo von Klenz in 1846. I liked using an early painting for this. And even earlier painting, by the way, or a mosaic, is of Plato's Academy. Look at this. So we had the philosophers philosophizing in the agora, in the lower part, and on high we have the gods, and in this depiction from Pompeii in the first century before Common Era, you have a depiction of the ancient philosophers, Plato, and the other philosophers discussing, and isn't that incredible? We think sometimes that our images that we have of the ancient Athenians in their togas or in their chitons actually discussing weighty matters is a new Western made up kind of thing, that maybe it wasn't quite the same. But you see, even back then, in ancient Pompeii, the Romans, this was the Romans' image of the Greeks, and this is what they emulated as well. This particular mosaic is found in a villa. Have any of you been to Pompeii? It's called the Villa of Simenos Stephanos, and it's actually currently in the Naples Archaeological Museum. I just saw it last month, actually. This might even be my picture. And so here I just want to show you what it looks like today. Here you have the Agora. Some of us will be wandering down here. On the very top, you see the Parthenon. And think about this now. So we have on the bottom here is where you discuss philosophy, and yet on the top, where you see the Acropolis, this is close to where you had theaters to Poseidon, where actually the Greeks invented drama. And you'd actually watch these Greek dramas and get a sense, and these Greek dramas would basically be retelling the stories of the gods. And what's incredible about that is, in many ways, the ancient theater, the ancient Greek drama was basically just liturgy, was prayers, it was sung, it was all done in meter. And initially it was meant to be a prayer to the gods. You had a sacrifice at the end. And what's very funny about this is that in ancient times, actually in the time period we're talking about today, one fellow who was basically davening, who was praying, he said, as I'm praying and singing this song, this liturgy, I'm going to have someone else play the part of Odysseus. I'll have somebody else play the part of Agamemnon. And this actor he chose to represent the other person, his name was Thespis. It would be like if I turned to Ari and I said, Ari, today I'm reading this portion of Shemot, and as I'm reading, I want you to be Aaron and start talking, and you're going to respond in Aaron's voice when I'm reading it, and he responds. And suddenly the people who are in the synagogue are saying, "What's going on here?" But it's kind of interesting, and that's how theater actually developed. The very word tragedy comes from the word tragos, which means goat, and od, which means song, a goat song. Because at the end of the prayer, you would sacrifice a goat to the gods. So all this happened here, where we're looking. I want you to get to understand this is the world we're exploring. And in the same place in the Agora, you had people wrestling, you had people running races, and you had people boxing, and you had people studying. Look at this, a teacher. And look in the background of these Greek vases. In a few moments, I'm going to start teaching you how to date and understand what Greek vases are. But look at this picture. You have a teacher sitting, opening a scroll. Look how it's rolled. It's like a Torah scroll. Look how he unrolls it. And a student is reading with him. And above it, you see there's a kithara, a kind of harp. On the left side, hanging up is a basket, basically with probably holding styluses, pens, paper, papyrus. And you have another person playing a musical instrument behind them. Look at these beautiful folded chairs. We get an incredible amount of information. The Greeks not only um, loved exploring and thinking, they loved showing everything. So every single Greek vase tells you stories. It'll be stories of mythology. It'll be stories of day-to-day life, of marriage, of tragedy, of warfare. Something simple like this here, where you have a person, two young athletes who have just finished working out, and each of them is holding a razor called a strigil. And after they'd finished working out in the agora, let's say they'd been wrestling, they would take the strigil, they'd cover their body with olive oil, and they'd scrape themselves. Thereby, of course, it's a very hygienic process. They'd remove all the bacteria and stuff, and they also would become also virtually hairless as well. So and this, by the way, this image you see right now is in a Greek vase known as a kylix. And what the Greeks would do is they would drink, they'd fill up their kylixes with wine, and they'd sit there and they'd have conversations. And as they were drinking the wine, they wouldn't know what the image was. It was only when they finally finished that they have an image. They go, "Hey, look, I got two athletes with a strigil. What did you get?" And the other guy would say, "Oh, I got this scholar scolding his student who's holding a stylus, and I'm correcting his material." And sometimes they'd actually be much more scandalous than that. You have a lot of pornographic imagery as well, depending, I guess, on your audiences and who you were. But the Greeks loved to share their knowledge among themselves. It was all, and you see on top, by the way, a lot of these vases have writing, so it actually tells you the names of the people, or it describes what's going on, and it actually has signatures of the vases. It'll say so and so painted me, or so and so made me. So you have the difference between the potter and the painter, and all this is going on at the very same time before we even have democracy, while kingships are still happening here. And the reason I showed you these images is we all know the famous Greek phrase, a sound body in a sound mind. Is that right? A sound mind and a sound body. That's right. And here you see already proof of this. You have the mind and the body in the agora, and you have the spiritual above. And what happens in the middle? That's going to be the place for democracy and law. So here we have, of course, I want to show you the Acropolis, the highest peak, and the agora. And here's just another image. I kind of just want to give you this modern look at the Acropolis. And I guess since we're moving into our theme now of democracy, I was going to say let's look at Athens in terms of what it's of its probably potentially its greatest contribution to the West. Democracy, is democracy the greatest contribution? We're going to discuss that today. It didn't spring up overnight anyway, but it came about in Athens in response to different types of historical circumstances that we're going to look at. So I don't want any of us, to think of Greek political history as this evolution that culminated in democracy. And that's a mistake, because even until today, we're not sure if democracy is the best form of governance. What's that famous line by Winston Churchill? Democracy is the is the worst type of governance aside from all others. That's paraphrasing, but something like that. So so let's start with this famous phrase by Aristotle in his book Politics. He says, "Man is by nature a political animal." He uses the word anthropos. I'm just thinking gender-wise, which is man, yes. But and what he means by that, by political, is that humans like to discuss before making a decision. So think about any of us now, whenever we go to a restaurant and you have a menu and we have to discuss what are you going to get, and those that don't discuss, those that say leave me alone, I'll know when they come. Your people can be annoyed at them. We have this innate human need to discuss, and those few that don't want to discuss, in the Greeks would call them a private person. So politics, the word polis means the city. Politics means matters of the city. If you did not take part in politics, in discussing matters of the city, you were called a private person. The word for a private person in Greek is idiotos. So you're an idiot if you are a person who doesn't take part in matters of the city, in greater matters. So already the Greeks had a word for somebody that did not take part. And this is before they had democracy, by the way, just to understand the importance of discussing, that the Greeks, and the importance of hearing the voices of others. And again, I'm looking for the clues. We're looking at clues for all of us together. This is one of them. So let's move on. So how was democracy born? I wrote here. How did one city in Greece reach this extraordinary conclusion that it could or should put political power in the hands of all of its citizens? So right here, I just put a depiction of Homer, an ancient depiction of Homer. And if you think about the Greeks, their most prized, I guess I would say possession, their most prized, um, I would say, gift to themselves were the works of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Alexander the Great, as he was spreading Hellenism and all these grand ideas of, as I said, philosophy and science and theater, etc., and governance, he had a copy of the Iliad that he slept at under his pillow in his tent every single night. So, and all that Homer is, if you think about it, is stories of kings who are trying to impose their types of rule on others, and it's all about humans and their drive to achieve. And the greatness of Homer, if you read the Iliad and the Odyssey, which I urge you to do, is the humanity that's in it, the discussion, the pain. Like Hector, before he's about to go to what everyone understands will be his final battle. They know he's going to probably die against Achilles. There's a description of him hugging his wife Andromache, and their son Astyanax. He goes to hug his son, and his son is afraid of his helmet, of his war helmet. So Hector takes off his helmet, and he and his wife laugh very tenderly at their child's fright, and then they hug all of them. Such a beautiful scene. And Homer is filled with discussions of two warriors about what it all really means. What does it all mean? Achilles, after when Odysseus meets him in the underworld, says to Odysseus, you're better off being a farmer than a king in the underworld." So you have these incredible deep discussions, and it's incredibly important to understand Homer as well and understand Greek mythology to understand ourselves, let alone the Greeks. One more time. So you have here, the reason I want to show you this is for many years people assumed that the Iliad and the Odyssey and all of these famous Greek myths were just that, myths, legends that had no basis in fact. And Heinrich Schliemann, who read these books, decided that this was much more than mere legend, and he used the Iliad as a kind of a travel guide, a guidebook. And he said, well, it says that this happened in the area of Turkey, the story of Troy. It says there's a river there, so Troy must be here. He dug a shovel in the ground, and he ended up finding Troy. It wasn't the exact Troy, but the exact Troy that he was found in the same location. Same thing when he said, they talk about Agamemnon, this famous king that was furious with Achilles, who sailed for Troy. He actually said, it says here that this is where he ruled, and he excavated and found it. So we should not be so quick to dismiss mythology, is what I'm trying to get at here. This is, again, I want to show you this idea that you have Zeus and Pluto, the gods, eventually giving birth to the very first kings and queens of ancient Athens. So I want to move to that and then show you already in 1800 BCE. I spoke about this with Ari just before. He was asking me, what about the first rulers of Greece, the Minoans, who were located on Crete? Some of us are going to Crete after the Greece trip, after the mainland Greece is over. Crete actually ruled all of Greece and had relationships with Cyprus and Egypt as well. And they were what was called the thalassocracy. They ruled from there. And many of the legends that we have, like the story of Theseus and the Minotaur, come from these are echoes of these stories. And they actually had a writing system over 1,000 years before the Greeks rediscovered writing, the alphabet. So it was called Linear A, which gave rise to Linear B, which is actually a form of Greek. And the Phaistos disc, which has not been deciphered yet, is also has a writing system. So, and when there's writing, there are records. And when there's records, you have economic writing, you have bureaucratic stuff, and also, of course, you have propagandic stories of kings' achievements, tales of victories, and eventually history. So writing also means sharing knowledge and eventually becomes part of democracy. Because think of the printing press, the idea that knowledge was available to everybody. This started with the alphabet. Being able to just take 23 or so symbols and gave rise to a system that meant anybody could learn how to read and write. That meant that anybody had access to knowledge. That meant that everyone could with knowledge as power and could ostensibly control a lot of what was going on around them. This is what, of course, you see with the theater, with Homer, with all his access to reading and writing and education. It's all part of the puzzle we're looking at. And of course, when you think of the printing press, think of the Enlightenment, when suddenly the Bible could be accessible to everybody, knowledge could be accessible to anybody, and even the Jews in our ghettos, it trickled through to us, and we had our Haskalah. And of course, this eventually gives rise to constitutions, writing systems that allow laws for everybody. And the Greek alphabet, as we know it, started being used in about 800 BCE. And so this recording system again is necessary for a viable governance and also a viable democracy. So I just want to show you, this is a reconstruction of Mycenae, this ancient kingdom of the Greeks. This is an excavated palace, a reconstruction of it on Crete looked like. We know this for a fact. Ari was asking before how he thinks we don't know that much. We actually know an incredible amount of what the Cretans, of what the Minoans believed, what they thought, how they worshipped. And this is thanks to these ongoing excavations for the last couple of 100 years. Here we go. Here is something that's very interesting. And here's where your education begins, my friends. This here is what's called a black figure vase. And whenever I'm going to show you vases throughout the rest of our lectures, our next 4 lectures, I'm going to show you black figure and red figure. And whenever I show you black figure, you're going to notice the figures are drawn in black paint. And parts that are scratched away. There's some red paint added and white paint added. This is what's called black figure. And it starts before 500. So if I show you anything with black figure, you're going to know right away. You're going to know immediately it's going to be older than 500. You'll say, okay, David, it'll be 510, 520, 530, 540, all the way up to 560. There are even earlier vases that are in the 600s. We'll look at those as well. You're going to be able to date vases. And as a result, you're also going to get a better sense of what was happening in different times. Here you have an image of Theseus, the first king of Athens, or the second, I should say, slaying the Minotaur, killing the Minotaur. So imagine this. In Greece, mainland Greece, you have a story of Theseus sailing from Athens to Crete and killing a Minotaur in a labyrinth. What happened centuries later, about a couple 100 years ago or less, Sir Arthur Evans shows up in Crete, starts excavating, finds images of, first of all, he finds a labyrinth where the kingdom of Knossos is located, and he finds images of bulls everywhere, these famous images of bulls leaping. This one is from 1600 BCE, from Knossos. And you see these echoes of Greek mythology actually have their root in foundation. There was obviously a strong relationship between the mainland Greeks and the Minoans, and they were forced to in these legends, in these myths, the Athenians were forced to pay tribute in the form of 14 youths every year who were sacrificed to them to the Minotaur, and Theseus eventually kills them. So in the labyrinth. So basically, you have by excavation many quite often, quite frequently, actually provide some kind of not legitimacy, but I would say some kind of um, proof that there was a relationship that was going on, and that a lot of these stories we're hearing are echoes of some of actual historical events. So this is Black Figure. Eventually, after 500 BCE, suddenly the Greeks decided that the Greek artists said, we can reverse the process. We can just paint around the actual clay, and when the clay is fired, the red will create the image, and the touches of paint afterwards will create the it's almost like a positive and negative. And these vases look much more like almost like photographs. Sometimes they're so exquisite, and this became the new way of telling your stories of both mythological and real and historical. Be it the wars of the against the Persians, or a local battle, or stories of the gods, or stories of just marriage, stories, anything you want, basically. And you have these beautiful images like this. Again, this is like Hylex. Remember what I told you? You would drink it, and at the end, when you finish drinking, you'd see what your image was. And of course, you'd be a bit buzzed by then, a little bit drunk, and you say, "Oh, that's really cool." You'd be happier and happier every time you saw another image come. So this one is from. If I ask you to date it, you're going to say, "Okay, David says it's going to be before five or older than 500, more recent 500," and you'll say it has to be 400 something, and you'd be right. And if you said to me, "David, this is 480 BCE," you'd be very right, because that's the date we believe it is. And this is actually Theseus on his way to visit the Minotaur, and eventually and kill him, and eventually rescue his people. So so this is so here's another one I want to show you. And now we're going to move into our topic a bit more. This around, so we have our earliest tales of Athens is of these king stories. So you have kingship after kingship after kingship, and eventually these rulers, they start getting challenged by the noblemen, by the local noblemen, local aristocrats. And these aristocrats say, we also want to share in the power. And the kings reluctantly have to give way. And around 700, you start hearing of a group of people known as the eupatrids. Eu, like meaning good, patrid is father. So the well-fathered oligarchy. So you start getting the power of the wealthy aristocrats. And the way you show your wealth is always how you can fight for your country, how you can fight for Athens. And if you can fight for Athens, you can provide horses, you can provide chariots, you can provide weapons. So the ones who were the wealthiest were the ones who got to rule in Athens. And so for several centuries, 700 to 595, you have this eupatrid oligarchy. And think of it this way: when you see mounted horse riders, including chariots, then you have to think this is the eupatrid time. When you start seeing more of the infantry, like foot soldiers, known as the hoplites, then you see this movement towards giving more power to the common people. So you have this gradual replacement of the kings by these eupatrids, and every local leader was known as an archon. So the archons were kind of little mini rulers over smaller parts of the Athenians, and it was divided into several parts. So actually to 9 different parts of Athens. And so this continued for quite some time. And but this monopoly was very the local Athenians who were not as wealthy started to feel abused by the system. They said if when you want us to go to war, we have to leave our crops, and our crops die out. Our fields, our animals need us too. And every time we go, why should we go and fight for you, basically, if we're losing everything? And gradually, begrudgingly, the eupatrids had to give more and more power to the regular people. And this is kind of the first movement you see to this kind of sharing of power begrudgingly. And you have and after 580 BCE, their political dominance gradually starts to fade and fade as the movements of the local citizens who are poorer but powerful because of their ability to contribute to the war effort becomes more important. The more wars there are, with the Spartans, with the Corinthians, with the other peoples, the more you get the local farmers claiming more power. And this rise of democracy, you can kind of see with the from the riders to the foot soldiers to this eventual recognition of the value of an ordinary citizen as a soldier. So here you have, you want to try and date this one for me? It's black figure, right? You see a black figure person, so you see the black paint. You see, look at the lovely writing all around it. I'm not going to show off and I'll read it to you, but I'll teach you how to read yourself. Hopefully, when we're together. So if you said to me, it's definitely older than 500, you'd be right. Is it 510, 520, 530? It's actually, this one is actually dated to 520 BCE. But I just want you to get a sense of how to date yourselves already. This is a typical Greek vase. And so here's a writer. Here's another writer. Look at him now. Look at the difference in quality, by the way. I love black figures, so don't think I'm prejudiced. I actually prefer it. But you can see the difference in quality in terms of how realistic the red figure looks once you get this. And so Athens is as I said to you earlier, they're expecting its citizens to contribute their own horses, chariots, weapons, and armor. And so this is why you see so many depictions of horses and cavalry at this time. So what about, give me a date, by the way, guys. Can you want to try a date for fun? So I say to you, it's going to be more recent. So it's not going to be 500. It's going to be in the 400s. And when you look at this particular quality, how developed it is, you also can see there's a Persian soldier, not an Athenian, riding the horse. You can look at war. It's actually 420, and you'd be right if you guessed the early, the mid 400s to 420. And here's another vase. Look at this one again. There's a black figure. And so you have here again this person on a chariot. Look at that beautiful chariot, his foot on the chariot, the way he's going to ride. This is accurate. This is not a depiction of what they imagined. These are actual people, someone who was looking at the chariots that was able to look and draw what they saw. So you have this person getting up on their chariot, look at him stepping up, look at that beautiful image. The horses, they can't, because it's black figure and they're drawing all the legs, look at that big jumble of legs. It's kind of confusing. I find it beautiful. But look, the other person is sitting there helping him adjust the stirrups of the horse. And in the background, you have Athena, the goddess of warcraft, I should say, basically symbolizing her blessing to the soldier as he's going off to war, the Athenian. So what you want to try and give me a date? You have, did I give you one here? It's black figure. It's older than 500. It's between 530 and 520 BCE. And here's another depiction of people at war. This one is this is very old. This is one of the oldest we have. It's about 560. Oh, I wrote it here. Sorry, never mind. So yeah, so you see this movement. And here's Aristotle talking about this gradual movement from the Athenians, moving from kingship to democracy. And what he says, what Aristotle tells us, is the earliest form of constitution among the Greeks after the kings consisted of those who were actually soldiers. The original soldiers had cavalry, the horses, because of its strength, and then gradually, as the states grew, more individuals came to have an influential part to play in government. So he's actually putting into words what we actually see in images. Here's another image I want to show. Isn't that beautiful? This Athenian foot soldier, a hoplite, going off to war. Look at his shield. Look how beautiful that shows that. First, you have the writing inside. You have the signature of the artist. Look at his arm grasping the strap of the shield. His helmet is behind him, and again it's a kylix, so it's a drinking cup. And then we have one of the oldest depictions of hoplites that we know. This is black figure, Corinthian, and here you have look in the background. Isn't that beautiful? You have a piper playing. This is what's known as the Macmillan, as the Shigi vase. It's about it's black figure, one of the earliest black figures, so it actually goes back to 650 BCE. But look at this. I want to see. I think I have a better one here in the next one. Here we go. Look at that. So you have now you have citizens becoming part of ordinary warfare. You no longer see the horses as much, and this is already in the 600s. So an ordinary citizen of Athens is important. And along with this sense of importance, he also has a growing sense that he has a right to be involved in a decision-making process. By the way, this is also the time that statuary starts to represent your regular citizens. We're going to go through this in our actual lecture on architecture and statuary, and you see the ordinary citizen being celebrated, not the kings, not the leaders, but the ordinary person recognized for their contributions as a human, and this is incredible. So this is the gradual eroding of monarchy, of aristocracy, and this movement of this great power of the masses that needs to be channeled. And you have different people trying to channel it in different ways, and that's what we're going to see. So with all this discontent, the people get together and they say, we have to have someone actually give us some kind of laws that are applicable to everybody. The nobility can't just say we're the noble, so we have our own rights, and you regular people have less rights. We've demonstrated that you need us for war. We've demonstrated you have to start spreading your power. Now we want you to create a constitution, a series of laws that are applicable to everybody equally. So that noble people can't get away with whatever they want, aristocrats can't get away with it. We all have to be equal in some way or another. And they hire a local aristocrat named Draco the lawgiver, they called him. And he replaced the system of what was initially only oral law with and the idea of blood feuds, an eye for an eye, by creating universally applicable laws. And these were the first written laws of Athens. You want to know what a constitution starts like? They would write it on wooden plaques, on triangular pyramid-style plaques, and these laws were shown all over, were displayed all over Athens, so that everyone could read them. It was meant to be accessible to all citizens. Also, by the way, this shows you the degree to which literacy was. Everybody could read. And there's so the laws. What were his laws like? It was from this fellow named Draco the lawgiver. You all know the term, I'm assuming, draconian. Draconian law comes from the fact that the penalty of most infringements on the law was the death penalty. So it was extreme, and it was he differentiated, by the way, between murder, accidental killing, but the harsh punishments and the harsh penalties is what it became known for the most. And but the main point to understand about Draco is that around 620 before Common Era, the people of Athens were no longer willing to accept arbitrary oral rules of the aristocrats, and they wanted established law for everybody. So this brings us to the point of democracy and law. Okay, once you get down a written law code, you're basically saying that's applicable to everybody. You're saying that even the aristocrats among us are subject to the same rules as we are. You're assuming responsibility for justice, and that is a huge change. And so when they asked Draco, for instance, I want to give you an example of how extreme he was. So the punishment for any kind of theft under Draco, even stealing a cabbage, was capital punishment, execution. And Draco said, if there's a worse punishment for stealing than capital punishment, I would apply it. So he was extreme. And one of the problematic aspects besides this in his law code is that people in debt, if you owed money, you could still be enslaved. You could sell yourself into slavery, but only if you were members of a lower class. And so but again, this is the beginning. This is the beginning of the codification of law and a common law. So because of this, perhaps because despite Draco's laws or because of them, things did not necessarily improve for the poor citizens. So farmers started being forced to mortgage their lands if the economy was tough, and many poor farmers lost their land to the nobility. So, and many more people started becoming enslaved. People started selling their when they went into poverty and they could no longer afford anything. They would sell themselves, their wives, their children, and so free men started being sold into slavery, and it became intolerable. So at this point, you remember you have this common discontent. The locals are very upset, and they're the majority. Like always, the aristocrats and nobility are a minority. So all the Athenians decide to elect a person, one person they acknowledge as a wise judge, as someone who's as fair, by the name of Solon the lawgiver. And Solon created a series of laws of reforms And let's see, and these reforms basically are seen as the rudimentary beginnings of true democracy. And let's see if I can show you that. Oh, this is what I wanted to show you. This is what statues look like at this time. By the way, we're looking at 630 BCE. So you have a common statue called a kore. It's a woman holding a pomegranate. You can, by the way, if you want to get some little ways of identifying a date, around this is about 620, 630. I see it, 630 before Common Era. You can see that her hair is kind of it looks beaded, right? You can see this beaded hair running down her shoulders. The men have it as well, by the way. And you see this kind of smile. This is known as the archaic smile. So when you see this smile and this hair, this beaded hair, and these almond-shaped eyes, you can always say this is going to be around 600 before Common Era. This is the beginnings of statues representing uh, the common people, basically. And look to your right. I included a vase, a red figure vase, and look at the top. You have people sitting in couches, holding kylixes, drinking vases, talking to each other. And this is an early depiction of a symposia. So in 600 BCE, you have people having philosophical discussions, drinking their wine. And by the way, these free citizens, these free people, they weren't when you reposed on your couch and you talked and you were a free person, you drink your wine leaning to your left. And this is why this idea of the symposium passed on through Hellenism to the Jews, which is why when we at our Passover Seder, when we have a symposia, we sit, we drink wine, and we discuss our story. We all drink to our left on a pillow to represent that we're free people, to represent we too can take place in our own symposia. It's a direct relationship to this. So, so we have this already depiction in the 600s of intelligent, cultured conversation happening. And below, of course, you have this mounted cavalry warning you, saying these are the people that are protecting us, that are letting our society function. So Solon, basically the lawgiver, he introduces this. This is a. I wanted to show you what a depiction of Solon according to our modern sensibility is. How you always this beautiful, bearded, intelligent-looking fellow, and this is actually what statuary at this time looked like. It wasn't that developed yet. So this is actually Solon, a depiction of Solon. Look at the beaded hair. Yeah, unfortunately, the smile, it's the part of the mouth has been chopped off, but he would have had an archaic smile. You can see the almond-shaped eyes. And so he introduced, so Solon the lawgiver introduced a fairer system of law. And what's most important for us at this moment is a jury-based law court called the Areopagus. And this shows once you have a jury deciding who is right and who is wrong, a jury of your peers, you are no longer giving any power to anybody, to any noble or king over you. Neither the gods nor the kings can decide. And this is a true assumption of responsibility. And this is one of Solon's greatest gifts to us. And so he resolved this situation that Draco created with compromises that the people of Athens could live with. He abolished slavery among the citizens. It was no longer possible to sell yourself. And he created numismatic coinage for people. And his reforms, as we're going to see, they failed in the short term, but he is credited, Solon, as having laid the foundations for what we know as Athenian democracy. That's why his name is so important to us. Here, by the way, is the Areopagus. We're going to be there together in I guess in October. This is the rock where they would actually have their law cases decided. The very first Greek play that we know of, called Agamemnon, it ends up in a law case being decided on the Areopagus right here, and it ends up in a draw. They have and Athena the goddess actually has to step down among the local citizens and cast the deciding vote. So even in one of our earliest playwrights talks about the importance of the law court, of the justice system. And here I am with a bunch of students. We ran in the morning. By the way, the chief, this guy in the purple right here is the chief rabbi of Greece. He ran with us to the top of the Areopagus. So those of you that want to run with me are welcome to. So, and then Solon exiled himself for 10 years. I'm not going to get into it. There's wonderful stories about his exile. But basically what he did by exiling himself is he forced the people to live with his law reforms. They could not ask, hey, Solon, what about this? What about that? He basically said, no, you have no choice. This is what you're going to have to do. Live with it. And there's many wonderful stories that Herodotus tells, the first historian, by the way, of Solon in exile. And I will hopefully get to them on another occasion. So this is a beautiful oil on canvas from 1624 of Solon, and he so he's so his reforms, while momentarily successful, eventually start to fail. You started having this division of this kind of conflict coming among the different citizens. On one side, you had the people of the coast that said of middle class and the peasants that liked his reforms. On the other side, you had the people called the people of the plain, who were including many local farmers who favored the restoration of an aristocratic government. They said there's too much chaos happening. We need a strong leader. And so into this beginning chaos came our very first tyrant. A tyrant in those days, his name is Pisistratus. Pisistratus, say it everyone, Pisistratus. In 561, a tyrant then didn't mean a tyrant the way we know it then. Tyrant just meant an absolute ruler. But you could be a philosopher king and be a tyrant. A philosopher king meant that you did what was best for the people, and even at your own detriment. You had to be a wise, caring, ethical, moral leader. And Pisistratus, who came to power around 560, took advantage of the unrest. He was a popular leader, so he wrested control of the Acropolis in Athens. He did a coup in 561, and at first they beat him back. So what he did, that was Herodotus tells that he came back and said, Athena herself has blessed me. And he got this very tall farm girl by the name of Phaia to accompany him in a chariot. This is what Herodotus tells us. And he rode back in his chariot with her at his side, saying, she has declared that I should be the leader of the Athenians. And to great pomp and circumstance, he was elected. And he took control of all of Attica as this constitutional tyrant. Constitutional because he set up a series of reforms that actually worked. And Pisistratus, by the way, did some incredible changes to Athens that lasted all the way through to even to modern times. He created the Greek drama system I told you about. He created the first great theater to Dionysus. He set up the Panathenaic procession, which was basically the main procession for all the Athenians to the Parthenon, and he minted the first Athenian gold coins, silver coins that we know of, and he set up also a beautiful system of plumbing that was called the Pisistratus Fountain, and he had incredibly beautiful. Look at this plumbing system on one side, theater on the other, and his projects enhanced the city infrastructure culturally, and I guess you would say day-to-day life as well. So he united Attica, and he basically laid the groundwork for Athens' future prominence under a democracy. So he basically, as a tyrant, he unified Attica, and he presented himself as this champion for the people. And he also weakened even though he himself was an aristocrat, he weakened the power of the aristocracy. He confiscated all their lands. He redistributed them to the poor. He strengthened these legal systems we're talking about. And he actually created a system of judges traveling to different places to impose law for everybody, even those that couldn't reach the Areopagus. And he encouraged creating loans to small farmers so they would no longer go into debt. So he created a wonderful infrastructure, and so he is also the first person to actually create a standardized version of the Iliad and the Odyssey of Homer's epics. So he did a lot, and this is under the power of a tyrant, of an absolute king. So I wanted to show you a picture of a Panathenaic amphora. By the way, this is the prize you get for winning the Olympic Games in ancient times. You have a picture of Athena, Promachus, for war, like set for battle, and this is also again a black figure. So this is basically Pisistratus. But the people themselves, they didn't want to have this to be set up in a dynasty. So when Pisistratus's children tried to come to power as well, you had these two local citizens by the name of Harmodius and Aristogeiton, who basically killed the children of Pisistratus to basically destroy a system of kingship again. They didn't want it to happen again. And so and this opened again, still more this possibility of creating this Athenian democracy. We have many, many copies of these sculptures, by the way, and of these depictions of killing Hipparchus, one of the children of Pisistratus. So again, so understand what's happening here. You have people gradually gaining power. You have the system. You have this discontent of the people, allowing a popular leader to move in, but they don't want the popular leader to create a system of kingship again. So when his children try and take control, they are killed. So again, we're moving. I just want to show you another beautiful kylix. And this is the kind of architecture you saw at this time. And now we move into our first true creator of democracy, a fellow by the name of Cleisthenes. I spelled it out for you so you can see it. Cleisthenes, sometimes spelled with a CL. In 508 BCE, he actually imposed the Athenian constitution, the way in many ways, the prototype that lasted, that worked. And he is known as the true father of Athenian democracy. So he decided that an area of Athens known as the Pnyx, one more time, we're gonna be walking there together, that this area, located, by the way, below the Acropolis, but not to the location of the Agora, should be the site of a regular meeting of citizens that would vote, discuss on matters, and vote as a direct democracy. And so Cleisthenes set up this regular meeting of citizens here. And this assembly that was known as ecclesia, where you get the word Ecclesiastes from, ecclesia, a gathering, and it served as this sovereign governing body where citizens would gather to discuss, debate, and vote on laws, policies, and other important matters. So this Athenian ecclesia was a place where every adult male citizen could and had to participate in this decision-making process. They didn't have to, but if they didn't, they were idiots, remember? So slaves could not vote, and neither could women. So it was a direct democracy for only the males above the age of 18. And they held all these significant decisions like war, foreign policy, and also very interesting, even ostracizing, exiling citizens who became too powerful. So this ecclesia would meet about 40 times a year in this open air kind of auditorium, as I said, midway between the Agora and the Acropolis. And this, again, the name of this place was called the Pnyx. And usually you had up to about 5,000 members present at any given meeting. And so these votes, let me show what they look like here. Do I have it here? Oh, this is with some of a group I brought to the Pnyx. And Cleisthenes also reformed the military. So every tribe had to supply a hoplite regiment and a squadron of horses, and a general of each tribe would command these soldiers. So he actually created a very good military system that, as we know, succeeded in both defeating the Persians and also eventually, of course, battled more or less successfully and then eventually unsuccessfully against the Spartans. So this was I'll explain in greater detail on another occasion, but this is basically the way democracy came about. You see why I'm hesitating to use the word evolution, but this is how democracy was born for the very first time. Here I want to show you this idea of the ostraca. So a piece of pottery, a broken piece of pottery, is called an ostraca, or an ostracon, actually. Ostraca is the plural. And one of the things you would do when you got together in the assemblies is you decide on matters, you throw your votes, but you also would say which person is becoming too powerful, too influential. And they'd write that person's name on the ostraca and they'd vote. And if there was enough votes, the person who was decided to become too powerful, too popular, was exiled, comfortable exile, very, very, very well funded for 10 years to move them out of the area where they can influence and make changes as a populist leader. And that's where you get the word ostracism from. Sending someone off because everyone has judged this person as a problem. And this is these are the shards of these are some voting ballots I want to show you. I think I started my very first slide with this. We'll see them ourselves in the Agora Museum. And so we have what did I want to say to you about that? I was going to say this. So this is what we call a direct democracy. So you have citizens playing a crucial and active role in shaping the government and the laws of the city-state. And so as we see, it wasn't an overnight matter or a question of throwing out monarchs. It's a process that developed and changed over time. So how would we compare this with uh, um, I guess one of the questions Ari asked me to address with the American system, which is as a Canadian, I felt kind of uh, I felt I had to study this a little bit to be able to answer successfully. So if in ancient Athens you have a direct uh, democracy, in America I believe you have a representative democracy. Ancient Athens had this direct democracy where every eligible citizen voted. In the U.S., you have this kind of a republic, right? Or is a representative democracy a republic where citizens elect representatives to make decisions on their behalf? So you have ancient Athens, you had limited citizenship and political rights only for free adult male Athenians. Women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded. In the US, of course, you have a broader definition of citizenship, and you have voting rights for everybody over the age of 18, regardless of gender or socioeconomic status, etc. And ancient Athens had these popular assemblies where all citizens would directly debate and vote, and public officials were chosen by lottery rather than elections. There was no distinct separation of powers like legislative, executive, and often judicial functions would overlap. So in the US, of course, you have this written constitution that defines the framework of government, including the separation of powers, three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. So anyway, so you have this. I'm not going to break it down. You know it as well. And ancient Athens relied on this majority rule, which could sometimes lead to these impulsive government systems. And they lacked these constitutional safeguards for individual rights that you have in the US and other democratic systems. So, so ancient Greece and Rome definitely influenced the structure of of the US Constitution. The Romans took it from the Greeks. And the concept of the rule of law, separation of power, and value that's placed on liberty and civic participation, like again, the idea of the idiot not taking part in their rights. And the US Constitution, if you look at it, borrows from this heavily from classical thought. So the writings of Greek philosophers, the structure of the Roman Republic rather than the Greek Republic is used. And so you have, so I'm going to end it just with this concept. I'll open it up to some questions. I see I went 7 minutes over. I'm sorry. Ancient Greece is credited um, with this idea of citizen participation. And I think that this idea, more than anything, influenced the founders of the US Constitution, who valued the idea of a government accountable to the people. And that is perhaps one of the greatest contributions the US has made, is this concept that has been used, I believe, is adapted and perhaps even improved upon by other democracies throughout the world. So I'll leave it at this for now. I'm going to end my stop share here, and I'll come back and I'll be here for questions.
Thank you. We are in overtime, so just a few quick questions for today. Number one is people ask, you've spent a lot of time in Greece, and we assume you know citizens of Greece. Do they know their own history? Like, do they know what you just taught us, or is that something that they know and they're proud of, or something that they take for granted, like we take in the United
They
States for
know it.
granted?
No, that's they know it, and they're extremely proud of it. But remember that Greece relatively recently reclaimed, created itself as a nation. They fought against the Ottomans, and they fought very hard to create themselves. And in many ways, what the Greeks will tell you is that they leaned very heavily into the fact that the contributions they made to mankind, their democracy, their story. So every single um, Greek student will tell you ad nauseum how they're educated in this. They say it's too much because they also want to learn regular things as well, but it's drilled in their heads just how important they've been to mankind. They say we don't even have chances to make new contributions. We have to know how great we were. So yes, it's very drilled. They know it very well. They all study their Homer, and it's extraordinarily important to them as in terms of their identity.
Another question. How quickly did this and how did this spread to other parts of the world at that time? Or did
Well,
it?
the Greeks were very um, what's their xenophobic. Like they weren't interested in other people's, and they did not want to share their knowledge. So the Olympic Games were only for the Greeks, not for the world. The Greek thinking was only for the Greeks. Alexander the Great was actually not Greek. Was not properly Greek. He was Macedonian, and he had a funny accent. The king, as a kingship, it was funny. So in many ways, this spreading to the rest of the world was because Philip II, Alexander's father, had a chip on his shoulder. He said, "Oh yeah, we're not properly Greek enough for you. I'm going to bring your greatest thinker, Aristotle. He's going to teach my son." And Alexander the Great took that chip on his shoulder and said, "This Greek knowledge that was only for the Greeks, I'm going to give it to everybody else by the sword." And so you have this basic. That's the first time you see the spreading of knowledge of Hellenism, and many people in the world also saw him as a savior. So including the Persians, the Egyptians. So it was a very interesting conquest, and that's why you see in Israel, the Jews. We have it's the only name we can actually give our children that's not Jewish is Alexander. So it was a very the spreading of Greek thought happened only under Alexander the Great, and that spreading uh, continued.
I see questions here about, did the Greeks know about Jewish tradition? Did the Bible, did that have any role to play in their society? I would assume no, but
No, not at
yeah.
all. The Josephus, Flavius Josephus, kind of has Aristotle talking about how he met this Jewish philosopher, how impressed he was with him with his knowledge. Definitely, almost certainly, uh, like not true, but cannot. But the Greeks were influenced by other peoples. Like they had trade with Mesopotamia. They received their alphabet from the Phoenicians. Don't forget, they had heavy trade with the Phoenicians. So they actually took the Phoenician alphabet. The Phoenicians took it from the Egyptians and adapted it, and they tinkered with it and made it one of the best form of literacy that we have until today, the alphabet. So they definitely had a lot of interaction with other cultures, and a lot of their achievements were made thanks to thoughts that were created in India, Mesopotamia, astronomy, Egypt, architecture. We're going to see in our lecture on architecture heavily influenced from Egypt. So they had a lot of influence from other cultures. They just tinkered with it, improved upon it, and made it distinctly their own.
Great. Last thing for today, because we are now late. Can you give us a promo for next week's program coming to us live from possibly Kurdistan? Vases, statues, and temples, I think is what we titled it.
That's right. So if you notice today, I put a heavy emphasis on your understanding the the way the Greeks channeled their thinking into their art. So you see it in their statuary, how gradually how they start to celebrate the common person, how they go from and you see it. We saw it in their vases, you see it in their statues, you see it in their temples. And what made the Greeks be able to build on such a monumental level versus other people were building kind of in clay and mud, or the Egyptians who just built for themselves these great pharaohs, great temples for the gods, but really nothing that celebrated the common person at all. It was kind of so. What made the Greeks different, and what created this form of architecture and art that we call classical, that we prize until today. And those of you that have done your reading will also know that this image of this pristine white marble figures, both statuary and temples, is a mistake. It actually was garishly colored. Beautiful. I mean, to many of our eyes, very color. They loved color, and the Greeks had something called horror vacui. They hated empty space. They filled everything with images, with writing, with ideas, and we're going to see that, and you're going to understand it better, and also how in terms it influenced us in our next lecture, our discussion session. Let's call it a session.
Terrific. One down, three to go, and hopefully you will come back for more. Again, whether you're joining us in Greece, going to Greece, or just learning about Greece, this is a terrific opportunity for all of us. Thank you, David. Safe travels.
Thank you very much, everybody. Love
And
to see you all.
I wish,
Bye for now.
yeah. And I'll see you guys soon. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Peter Mesnick, you're looking young today,
Shalom,
Peter.
y'all.
You're looking young. Peter got a
Where's
haircut.
Peter?
You're
I don't
looking
see him.
good. He's right there.
I gotta see him. I
Peter will
gotta
be
go
on the
through all
trip
these
to
faces.
Greece. That's why we're saying hi to him. Okay. Ruth Schick, good to see you as well. Nice to meet some of the new people, Arena. Nice to see you.
Bye for
Mitch
now.
as well. Take care, everybody. See you soon. Bye.
Bye for now.